Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome as you're joining. We're very happy to have you here with us today, again, this afternoon or this evening, based on where you're joining us from, to talk a little bit about pacing with the Reporteros and Reporter Francophone programs. We're very excited to be joined by some of our current users and experts, and they're going to be able to share with you their experiences and tips and tricks from the classroom and from their programs in their districts. So we're very excited to have them here. And again, thank you for being here. We know it's August. We know it's very busy for everybody. So we appreciate your time and you tuning in to us. A lot of you might have already met me or seen me or heard my voice on a video somewhere. My name is Sarah Stefanich, and I'm our implementation manager here at CLET World Languages. My background is in Spanish language teaching and linguistics. And here at CLET, I head up our implementation team, which serves to support teachers as they work with CLET materials, both in terms of the content, teaching, the platform, and kind of really anything related to world language teaching and pedagogy. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to connect with our team of panelists who are here with us today. And so we are joined by four amazing teacher administrators who are going to share all of their insights with us. So we have Aubrey Swisher, Carmen Reyes, Mirta Valles Wagner, and Kelly Vadova. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves here in a moment. And so for all of you who are joining in and listening, we're going to do this kind of panel style. We have a series of questions prepared that we're going to go through and we'll share, have some discussion. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat and the Q&A, and we will stop and have some time for Q&A at the end of the session. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to do some introductions from our panelists to tell us a little bit about who you are. So your name, where you work, your role at the school or district, and then when it is that you adopted Reporteros or Reporter Francophone. And so, Aubrey, you are first up on my screen, so I will pass it over to you to get us started.
Okay. Hi, guys. My name is Aubrey Swisher, and I'm heading into my 17th year as a secondary Spanish teacher in Washington County Public Schools in Maryland. I teach Spanish this year, levels 2 through AP, but in the past, I've had one every other year. I am also the department head, and we adopted Reporteros for our Spanish program in a county-wide system, and that was in the 2022-2023 school year, where we started to look at all of the different products, took Reporteros, tried piloting alongside some others, and it's the one that won our hearts. We adopted it, and we started using it in the 2023-2024 school year.
Great. Thank you so much, Aubrey. Thank you for being here with us. Carmen, you are next on my list.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Carmen Reyes. I am a Spanish teacher at the Langley School in McLean, Virginia. I am the World Language Department Chair and Program Lead. And we adopted Reporteros about 2 years ago, and this is actually our third year using the program.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Carmen, for being here with us today. Mirta, you are next in my row.
Hola, buenas noches, Mirta. I teach in a rural district in Maryland's Eastern Shore in North Carolina High School. I'm going in my 30th year teaching, and we adopted Reporteros 2 years ago and also Reporteros Francophones, and we will be starting in our third year this fall.
Yay, that's so exciting. Thank you, Mirta. Thank you for being here with us. And last but not least, Kelly, your turn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Vadova. I'm from the Green Bay Area Public School District, where I am the curriculum coordinator for world languages, along with dual credit program and the Seal by Literacy coordinator. We piloted Reporteros in January of 2023, and the board approved adoption of it in March of 2023. So we started using both Reporteros and Reporter Francophones in the fall of 2023.
Wonderful. Thank you and welcome, Kelly. All right, so we're going to dive in now to learn a little bit about their experience. But before we do that, I want to give you all just kind of a baseline information in case we have any kind of people with us this afternoon who haven't started working yet with Reporteros or who are unfamiliar with the program, we just wanted to make sure you kind of have the baseline information. So Reporteros and Reporter Francophone, which are the two programs we're focusing on today, they're sister series. If you are one of our German Das Reporter team users, or you're thinking about using German, or Giovanni Reporter for Italian, they are aligned with one another. So a lot of the tips and tricks and information that you will learn this afternoon can also apply to those programs, even if our panelists are not directly teaching or working with them. So the Reporters programs, they are 4-level programs that take us from novice low to intermediate high levels of proficiency, and they are aligned and ready to set students on that pathway towards those upper level courses, AP courses, and be successful in whatever way, shape, and form they would like. Each level is going to have 6 units or 6 chapters. And then there's also an additional kind of preliminary unit, a unit 0 or review unit in levels 1, 2, and 3. And this allows for a very consistent architecture across all 4 of those levels. The Reporters program, they are proficiency based, and so they follow a very nice sequence in order to build communicative proficiency and skills for the students. We have, all 3 of those modes of communication following actual performance tasks. Students are reading, writing, listening, and speaking. It's really great balance. And the Reporters program comes with a lot of resources. So of course you have the textbook and the workbook, and then also a host of online resources and extra worksheets and content, which is why a lot of times we get these pacing questions about, well, how do I put all this together? What does this look like? What do I prioritize? How much time should I spend, right, in textbook activities versus workbook activities and things like that? And so to help start answering some of these patient questions, our editorial team and our teams here at CLET have developed some resources. So you may already be familiar with these, but we, of course, offer your basic scope and sequence for each level. This is great to see that vertical alignment throughout the 4 levels of the program. And then there are pacing guides developed for 50 or 90-minute classes, kind of a starting point, and corresponding lesson plans that go with those 50 or 90-minute classes. And so these are kind of, if you want to cover everything, here's kind of the pacing that you would have to work at. But of course, right, you're not going to cover everything. We don't recommend that you do every single activity. That would be a lot, and not every single assessment and things like that. And so they are meant to be adapted, and we're going to learn about how they've been adapted from our panelists this afternoon. And then there are also some various learning paths available to kind of help with the adapting of the pacing guides. So for hybrid teaching or for critical learning tasks, kind of removing some things to make it a bit more kind of essential what you would need to cover. And then also some lesson at a glance documents to kind of help map out as you are lesson planning. And you can see some little images of what those are. So these are the resources that are already available to you. But of course, you might have questions in terms of how do I use these? What changes do I make? What do I do? And so that is where our experts come in today to share with us what they did, how they did it, what they learned, and to provide you with some amazing information. So we're going to go on to learn a little bit about their initial adoption, right, that experience. And as a part of that, we'd love to know what your world language courses look like. So that we can kind of situate as we talk about the pacing. How many days per week do the teachers get to meet with the students? How many minutes per day? Do they have block schedules, 50 minutes, 90 minutes, like 43 minutes, right? There's all different types of combinations. So I'm going to turn it back over to our panel here. And so we can see everybody's lovely faces. I think I will stop sharing this so we're all a bit bigger for everybody. And so let's see, Carmen, do you want to start with this one by telling us a little bit about what your world language classes look like?
Sure. Our middle school focuses on helping students to become confident communicators while exploring the culture of the Spanish-speaking world. So that is why also checking the calendar, the classes we have in every marking period, we decided that our 6th graders will work with Reporteros 1A, 7th graders work with Reporteros 1B, and 8th graders work with Reporteros 2. And this is aligned also to our schedule. In our schedule, our students meet 4 times per week for 55 minutes. And this gives us enough instruction time to incorporate interpersonal activities, projects, cultural exploration, and performance-based assessments that are offered in the platform. So students can use the language in meaningful ways.
Great, thank you so much. Kelly, what about you all up in Green Bay?
So we currently now have 55-minute class periods every day for the entire school year, and that's for every single level. We had come from doing the like half of a level in seventh grade, half of a level in eighth grade, and we had a lot of issues with students not who took the first half of level one, didn't take the second half, and then had to take the whole level again in high school. And we were also struggling with FTE, or coming up with enough teachers to teach all of that. So we currently offer our Spanish 1 in eighth grade across the district. And then we have Spanish, French, Chinese, and ASL at all of our high schools starting in ninth grade. So they're all 55 minutes, 5 days a week for the full school year.
Thank you. Aubrey?
Okay, so I think Boonesboro High School's schedule is a little bit unique within Washington County Public Schools. There are 9 other high schools, but my supervisor just did tell me that some of them might start to switch over to what we're doing. So we do have some differentiated courses with Spanish 1 and 2. So we have what we call on-grade Spanish 1 and on-grade Spanish 2, and we meet with those kids year-round for 45 minutes. We also have kids coming in at varying levels. So coming from the middle school, I might get a ninth grader that is entering my Spanish 1 class, a ninth grader that's entering my Spanish 2 class, or a ninth grader entering Honors Spanish 3. And we do have other students that didn't get that chance in middle school and want to get as many levels as possible. So we were doing our honors levels as semesterized courses. So we meet with them for 90 minutes. So if I have an honors Spanish 1, I will only see them for half of the year, but it'll be a 90-minute course. And then they can roll straight into the next honors level 2, honors level 3. So those are all 90 minutes. The Spanish 4 class is also a dual enrollment class. So we do have that one year round for 45 minutes. And then AP, in order to have the students on a regular basis and make sure that they are prepared and we don't have to fight with like, are we going to do fall or spring semester? We keep them as a 45-minute year-round class as well. Our levels in the middle school, they do use some of the 1A, 1B books, but the kids that are on a faster track, like I believe they call them the merit level kids, use the level 1 book. And then the magnet kids that end up in my honors 3 as a freshman student are using the level 2 book. We do everything by the levels. Spanish 4, we only used about half of the Spanish 4 book because we have to integrate materials from the community college as well. And then we were using the other half of Spanish 4 to subsidize some of our AP materials. So level 4, they're really good materials to also work with. If you've checked out the Generación AP, the AP book by Colette, it's also a wonderful resource. So we play back and forth with those.
Wonderful. Yeah. You can see everybody so far has a little bit of a different structure and setup for their world language courses, which absolutely right. There is no one size fits all when it comes to language teaching and curriculum design and pacing. So I'm glad to have you all here with us to share. And Mirta, what about your world language courses?
So for us, we have a middle school program that is mostly in an exploratory for Spanish and French, but the Spanish one is what's taught all year, so 15 minutes all year. It's a small number of students compared with the amount of students that we get in high school. We in the high school have 88-minute blocks, so I would say, we round it up to 90-minute blocks. The students only take the course for that semester, so it would be August to January 26th, January 28 through the end of the school year. Depends on snow. It could be, June 11 or it could be June 18 like this year. I teach this year, I taught Spanish 2, 3, 4, and AP. So I've had a really great scope of all the Reporteros levels. And just like Aubrey as well, I could have a ninth grader in Spanish 2, or I can have an 11th grader in Spanish 2. So that's how we do it in Caroline County as well. So.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And so, given the difference in the unique scenarios and situations and times and days of the week that you all meet and are able to meet with the students, when the decision was made to adapt Reporteros or Reporter Francophone, how did you decide what pacing, how the initial kind of this is what we're going to aim to cover, right? At least this first year, right? During the rollout, but then kind of thinking long term what the goals were. Who was involved in that conversation? Was it kind of group decision, unanimous, or did someone kind of make it? And then remind us if you piloted as well and kind of were able to test out the materials and the pacing before the official adoption. So I'm not sure if there's anyone who would like to go first.
I can go first. We
Yes,
also in Caroline County want to focus on college and career readiness. So in the Reporteros, books always kind of goes away from that traditional, boring grammar drills to something that the students can have real world communications and use the language. When we adopted it, of course, our supervisor, Renee Hesson, would work with CLED and what would be the best way to roll this out. We did not pilot it. And so I think the first year is a learning curve. And I think every year, I think the Reporteros curriculum is going to be dictated also by who are your students. When I had my Spanish 4 class, I really wanted to get to the Guatemala lesson. So I might have switched the units, the order, because I had so many students that were from Guatemala there. And I think I really like to make sure that the book and the lessons are calling to them. So I don't particularly have to go in the same order. And I have to be honest, in a block schedule, with so many things that we could do and the little time that, we do have together, I would say that for me personally, getting to 4.2 in either Spanish, 3, 4 AP, or 2, 3, or 4, really how it works for me. I think I'm sure other people can do that, but to go at that pace and kind of really give her the attention that it deserves, that's how much I was able to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I'll bring back about switching that order of the units and the lessons because I know that is a common question. So we'll bring that back up once we get through the groups. So Aubrey, Carmen, or Kelly would like to share kind of what the initial rollout looked like.
I
Sure.
can continue.
Okay.
Everybody wants to share. Yeah, so Carmen, why don't we go with you? Yeah.
Well, when we first adopted Reporteros, we as a department took time to review the scope and sequence, especially, and the digital platform and all the resources. And after exploring and reviewing, we decided to use it as a complement rather than as a blueprint, right? A script blueprint. So that means that we can move to different units. We can skip a unit and then go back to that one because it's complementing our curriculum. And this decision was based on different aspects. For example, our instructional calendar, the proficiency goals we wanted our students to reach by the end of the school year, and also the amount of instructional time we had. Another important aspect was evaluating students to make sure, especially during the first year, to check what was their level of proficiency. And also was important to be very flexible, right? Because since this was our first year, we didn't know how long it was going to take them to complete a project or an activity. So it's important to leave that flexibility in the curriculum during the first year. We didn't run a formal pilot, but we spent time exploring the materials at the digital platform, and we adjusted the following years.
Yeah, great. And would you say kind of using it in that supplemental sense, more or less like how much units or lessons do you think are brought in to the courses?
We covered the core units, all the core units. But what we don't do is using all the resources, all the activities, right? We decide which one we will use according to our students' needs and our goals. But we covered all the units.
Wonderful. Absolutely. I love hearing that, right? Because we very much recommend you adapt Reporteros and the Reporter Francophone to your curriculum, right? To your district, your school, your students, your style and needs. And it's very much designed to be used that way. So I'm glad to hear that you are using that way and it's working. So that's excellent. So Kelly, let's go over to you.
So when we started, we had done the pilot and we had 3 Spanish 2 teachers throughout our district use Reporteros 2. We had standards change during the pandemic. So when we came back from the pandemic, world language wasn't a priority for the district, nor was it for many at the time. It was math and English. So world language was kind of pushed to the side. So when we piloted in the spring of 2022, we realized that our students weren't yet at that level, a level 2, a true level 2, because we had taken a level 1 and made it into 2 years and called it level 1, 2 kind of thing. So we had to really work at kind of bumping up our levels so that they were truly aligned with the proficiency goals. Our initial goal was to get through all 6 units, and most people got through like unit 5. Some got through lesson 1, some got through lesson 2 the first year because we had separated out the preliminary unit and done that first, for a long period of time. So then the following year, we took the pacing recommendations from CLET, where you can figure out where those preliminary activities are needed, and then we put those before the units. So then we get closer to 6 units each year, and we're a little, I wouldn't say less flexible. We're still very flexible with the teaching and what the teachers are choosing, but because it's being used across 14 different schools in our district, having that continuity of what they're getting through, because we also have students who move throughout the year and start in one Spanish class and then transfer to another Spanish class. So they can't be wildly different in terms of where they're at or what they're doing. So we just have like that expectation that they're going to get through these particular units, and we agreed. Again, it wasn't like the district saying you are to do this. This was all the teachers coming in and discussing what they wanted for their world language program and how they wanted it to go. So we decided on common summative assessments, being the IPAs, for every unit, every level, every language, so that we can have discussions across buildings about how the students are doing, how we can help support, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelly. And I've written down some follow-up questions to ask and kind of share some more in depth. So I've got some great ideas. We could be here all night, everybody. We will not be here all night. Don't worry. We will end on time. Aubrey, we're excited to hear from you about your initial adoption and kind of pacing as you rolled it out.
Okay, so when we rolled it out, we're a good sized county, and we include all the secondary teachers. So we had the middle and the high school teachers. What Kelly was talking about, where some students move during the school year, so maybe not even just to a different teacher, but to a whole different high school or middle school, but they're still within the same county team. We did want to make it pretty seamless. And, if they were repeating a little bit or skipped ahead a little bit, it wouldn't set them back or cause them to be bored, because we definitely want to retain our numbers. So we figured out our first year, let's just go with it. We need to go see what we can do with it. We're going to come back together, reflect, evaluate, and see how we can revamp this for next year. We're going to see what we liked about how long it took us to do each thing. So that's what we did. We shot to do all 6 units, and it was hit or miss. Some people did go fast enough to get all 6 units. Others ended somewhere in 4 lesson 2. Some people were in level 5, but they did get to have a good portion. afterwards, after that first year, we had a collective Google form from my supervisor, Paula Moore. And she has always done this with whatever resources that we're doing. And she wanted to know how it went. We needed to reflect on certain units and lessons. And also, what did we think was feasible? What could we get done in a year? So we've changed things little by little each year. I know I pulled up our pacing guide. 2023, we put all 6 on there. 2024, we cut off lesson 2 from unit 6. And then we went back just a little bit more. We stayed the same 2025 and 2026. So we kind of figured out that for us, we do unit 0 and unit 1, 2, 3, unit 4, lesson 1, and then unit 5. That's where we try to come together in level 1. And then level 2 is very similar to that. We've got the first unit, 0, the preliminary, but teachers are also welcome to use unit 6 from level 1 if they think that would be something that would suit their students better. And then we move into level unit 1, 2, unit 3, lesson 2, unit 4, unit 5, and then that's the expectation. Unit 6 is open as something optional. But it's been going well, and the feedback, like, we keep getting more and more people on the same pace. So I will tell you, whoever's starting out, I mean, for me, it's hard to go by a script. If you're going to tell me this is going to be 21 days, you never know what's going to happen, or if there's a fun holiday or current event, you definitely want to take advantage of that. But you'll find your groove.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys brought up a lot of things here kind of in common, some common experiences about this initial, period of adjusting. And so one of those was about kind of the flexibility of the program, so, Mirta, you mentioned kind of maybe swapping some units or some lessons around, not going in order. Carmen, same kind of thing, right? Saying we already have our sequence and kind of pulling in what fits. And then Aubrey, yours as well. You're like unit 4, lesson 1, but not unit 4, lesson 2. And so I was wondering if any of you want to expand on kind of that flexibility of maybe where you moved things around, or you're deciding not to do this lesson of this unit and so on. If you'd like to share any kind of examples or kind of your experience with that as kind of a little bit of a follow-up.
Yeah, I wanted to add something. It also depends where you are, in your state and in whatever you're teaching. My students are in a really rural area. They don't have a lot of rural experiences. So we want to bring that global classroom ideas into them. And sometimes I would tweak the projects a little bit. Could not do everything, but I would, instead of comparing, the Panama Canal with a place in Spain, I would have them compare the Panama Canal with, the Chesapeake Bay, which is by where we are, just to bring that real life into, world information and global issues to our area. And I think that's something that Reporteros does really well, that gives you kind of the stage to do that. And I remember when we were about to get Reporteros, I had a conversation with Aubrey, and I think Aubrey gave me an advice that was really great. She goes, think about it like you're in a cafeteria style, but you don't have to pick everything on your tray. You can just choose what works. And I did have to teach Spanish 2 last year for the first time, and I'll be teaching it again. I'm sure some things will be different because my students are different. They're coming from different areas. And I think that's really important. And the same we did. We kind of had to change the units and how we're doing it. And as we worked as a team, we're fairly small, only 2 high schools and 2 middle schools. So the conversation is really easy between us. So I just wanted to add that adapting the curriculum that you have to and your students to what Reportero is offering. But I think that one of the things that I love the most is that there's so much inclusion and equity in Reporteros, and I think that's really important for students today.
I think whenever you're choosing what to do and what to focus on, if you happen to be in a county system like Mirta and I are, where you've got to have a lot of people collaborating and being in the same sort of spot, I would definitely recommend looking at the different projects and assessments. If you need to come up with common assessments, and look at all of those like a menu too. You can't get them all done. But so I know for level 1, well, all the levels, we had teams of teachers at a PD looking at everything in unit 1. And we were like, what is what is the key assessment that either it's like really going to show off the kids' skills or they're really going to love it and it's going to be real world. What can we pull for this one? And so it wasn't always what was just marked as the IPA. Like we've got mini project 1 for unit 1. Unit 2, we used the IPA. Unit 3, mini project 1. Unit 4, we went back to the IPA. Unit 5, mini project 2. Unit 6, mini project 2. And we went through and we made sure also that we were balancing what skills they were using. So we had interpretive reading and presentational writing this time. Next time, we're going to focus on interpretive listening and interpersonal speaking. But that way we could see what our end goal was. So if you're using just bits and pieces of the book, you still know what your common assessment is going to look like, what you want your students to be able to do. If you're using the book as your primary resource, same thing. You realize you don't have to do every single thing and you're going to focus so that your kids can really show off that they've worked on their reading and writing. And now that you're going to see how have they grown with their listening and speaking the next time. That I think was helpful for us as a large team.
Yeah. Kelly or Carmen, anything you'd like to add?
I would just say, like, we had done the first year where we selected several different assessments for each level and so on. And we used the Apple for the seal of biliteracy in our district. And the teachers felt that the IPAs most mimicked that in terms of what the students have to do on the IP or on the Apple assessment or the other assessments for the seal of biliteracy. So what we then did is called out the standards for each IPA for each unit. And then we worked with CLET to do a lot of professional learning around like intentional planning using backward design. So I know unit 1 in level 1, it's interpretive reading, interpersonal speaking, presentational writing. So I keep that in mind the whole time I am planning through that unit. You know, like what of these activities are going to help those students be successful on that IPA? Because again, there is way more material than anyone could ever get through in a year. And that is fantastic. And that's how, great textbook companies are. So it offers a lot of flexibility, but it can be overwhelming sometimes because some people feel like they need to cover every single thing in every unit, and that's not the case. So it's really kind of honing in on what are those things that the students have to be able to do and what activities really will help them get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a question from the chat as we're kind of talking about this, about if a breakdown was provided in terms of a syllabus kind of for the students in terms of letting them know ahead of time, this is what they're aiming to cover throughout the year, or was that information presented to the students kind of weekly? So in terms of, getting students on board with a new book and program and new ideas. So did you guys do anything specific for the students in terms of prepping them for pacing and the change?
For the syllabus, anything like that for the students, we just kept it general. If you open up the beginning of your Reporteros textbook, you're going to see the title of the unit and also the essential questions. So we put those in, but we didn't mark down like a certain length of time that we would be focusing on those. That was just everything that we were hoping to get to. And it would be like, this year, you will be able to do this, and we will highlight these countries. And we had the target cultures. So that's as much detail that we went into them so we could have flexibility, but still give them an idea of like what the scope of the course was going to be like, what they would see, what they could expect. And it's also really cool for them to have some idea as to what they're going to be doing, so that if their parents are checking in or somebody just asks them from another school or maybe a native speaker, like, what kind of things are you learning? They have something to say and not just like, I don't know, and a few, canned sentences. They can see where they're going, but at the same time, we left ourselves the privilege of having some flexibility. And it wasn't like, hey, I thought we were supposed to be doing this right now.
One of the resources that I found super helpful for me was that one of the resources that GLAD gives you for reporteros is kind of like a time frame. I might say this lesson might take 1 to 2 days. And so I like to print that. I'm still like a paper and pencil kind of a girl. And I like to do them every year. I'll print, actually, I used the one from the fall and the spring and kind of changed the color marker just to see where I was and where I was going to go. And that's very helpful, but it's really hard to tell, okay, you're going to do this in 8 days because we can have a snowstorm and then the students may not be getting the material and they're not hitting the standard. So but it's there to help you and it kind of guides you through the process as a teacher as well.
In my case, we have the syllabus, which is very general as well, but we have a newsletter that we share with parents every 2 weeks. So we plan in advance what are we going to do during the next 2 weeks. So students are aware what are the units or the activities, as a glance, what are we going to do in the following 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And so I think we've seen kind of something similar so far from everybody. And Mirta, can you remind us how many units you guys are covering, more or less?
I believe that I'm getting to 4.2 mostly in
Okay.
Spanish 2, 3, and 4. One of the reasons is because I have been going to the AP Read, and so I leave a little earlier than the school ends. But I think even in my best in the fall, that's what I was doing.
Okay.
I may get to 5. I think I got to 5.1 for Spanish 4, but again, I might have a colleague who's doing all 6 of them in Spanish 1.
Okay.
It just depends.
Okay. Yeah. So we're seeing kind of some flexibility there. And so my follow-up to kind of to that, right, which is if you're covering all 6 units or maybe you're doing 5, and I think Aubrey, you kind of alluded to this already earlier, but are you doing anything specific to kind of pick back up, right? If you don't cover a unit in level 1, right? Let's say, are you for sure covering that in level 2, right, in Spanish 2? Or are you saying, well, we're just going to skip that and come back to it or build it in, right? So like what strategies have you all developed in terms of using these units in lessons kind of flexibly, but to make sure students, are covering and hitting, all the standards and things that they need to be learning? Because this is a common question a lot of teachers have, right? Which is, can I skip a unit? Can I flip them around? Or, and then what are the consequences if they do that, right? What do teachers need to be aware of? And so if you all have any lessons that you learned that you'd like to share.
In our school, what we do is, since our students are middle schoolers and they graduate in 8th grade and they need to take the high school placement test, we make sure we complete all the units about present tense, and then we move to past, pretérito, for example. So that is when we skip a unit, but then we go back in 8th grade to start with pretérito and we move on to future and etc.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah. So some rearranging, right, of the order, right, and the structure based on the grammatical structures and the content there that you need to hit. Absolutely.
With our previous book series that we've had, curriculum series, we were having the same, I think, as Kelly, where you were in Spanish 2, but you had the second part of Spanish 1 book, and then you would be in Spanish 3, but a Spanish 2 book. And I think we're very much conscious to really do Reporteros Uno for 1, Reportero Dos, Reporteros Tres. And I think one of the things about Reporteros is if you miss something, it usually shows up in the next one, in the next unit. And you can always, put it into your, integrate it into your lesson, whatever the weakness of the students is, if you need to do any, which is great it has great materials for tier 2 interventions in Reporteros. So I think that's really one of the things that we're doing is trying to be very focused and very aware that we want to cover the material for those levels, because the first year, it was the first semester that I taught Spanish 4, we thought about using Reporteros 3, and I did it for maybe 2 weeks, and I said, no, let's just go to our 4 book, because I didn't want to get into that again that we've done in the past.
From my experience, it was the first year was where we sometimes played with what unit we were using where, or maybe we took something from the Unit 2 book or the Unit 1 book and flip-flopped them because we were trying to bridge from what those students were coming from. And so we had that 1 year where it was just a transition year. So that's where we played around with things. But after that, we were like, okay, we got those kids to the end of where they need to be for Spanish 1 or 2, whatever level. And then we tried to shift them, like Mirta said, straight into the regular level book that aligned with their course number. I have found that to be the best way to use Reporteros. I think they do a great job of recycling things. It's important to realize that this is a proficiency-based program. So if you're coming from something that was different, you might feel a little panicked at first. Like if you're in a level 2 book and you get to this unit and you're like, whoa, what's going on with this preterite or whatever? I would really recommend giving it a try. This was my first time having students come into my level 3, and it was near the beginning, and we did preterite versus imperfect, and those kids got it and they understood it, and it did not take a lot on my part. And I was like, oh my gosh. But you have to put a little bit of trust in the process, and sometimes it does feel a little uncomfortable at first. I would also say lean on the teacher book. I do know that one of my colleagues was feeling a little bit stressed out because he had never taught, I don't remember if it was preterite or imperfect at that lower level, and was trying to come up with ideas. And I gave him an idea and he was like, oh man, like, how'd you think of that? And I said, hey, it's in your book. It's right there in the teacher notes. So look at that. I know they're tiny and in the margins, but mark that thing up or use Post-it notes. It will help you. It'll help you learn how to do the proficiency-minded teaching. And, the first time you do it, you're going to be outside of your comfort zone, but it gets easier and easier. And then the book is going to flow. And then they're not going to perfect everything right away, but they recycle it, comes back, and then they refine it. And then all of a sudden, the kids are to the level where they can do things without having to think about it and pause and wonder or guess. And finally, they can give you the reasoning behind it. Like my students were explaining to me why they made the choices that they did. And I think it was really exciting to see.
I love to hear that. That's so exciting. And yeah, and I can share you from my own experience when I was teaching and having moved from a very traditional teaching style to a more proficiency oriented teaching style, that it takes some time to get used to it. The flow is a little different in class, the pacing, the timing too, right? And so the first time you're using Reporteros and Reporter Francophone, you might have to feel it out in terms of like how long this is going to take you. You might not know. And it also could be different, right? Every group of students has different strengths. And so you might get through it really fast in one class and then not so fast in the other class. Absolutely. So thank you for bringing that up, Aubrey. I appreciate that. And what about other kind of lessons learned or revelations that were had kind of the first year or so of implementation? Did any drastic changes were made? And what was teacher and student feedback like? So we're kind of moving from that first year now into kind of second and third years and beyond, and to learn kind of where you're at currently. Well, some of which we've already mentioned, but if any you want to bring it back
I
up.
have some feedback from my students. I did at the end of the year survey for my classes for just to see how it was all about Reporteros. I just wanted to know how they felt about it. And I'm going to read some of it. I have it on my other screen. And I like the unit about neighbors. And the unit, we learned all about different places and things like the rainforest, deserts, and more. I love the Costa Rica and the Argentina unit. And one of those things I want to also add, because I'm in a rural area, students don't get a lot of exposure. I try to bring guest speakers through Zoom. So I have a friend who's Argentinian and she's in New Jersey and she'll come and do a 10-minute lesson about mate and everybody gets to go home with a little mate. I have someone who's visited Peru that comes through Zoom. And, that way my students have real world, authentic experiences and can ask questions. They said they love all the projects, and I have to say the projects are my favorite part of Reporteros because I love students doing any kind of STEAM work and working with their hands and thinking, and I thought that was great. And they said that when someone says it was so much fun, and I love the videos of Reporteros. So that's some of the students' feedback, which I think is always great.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. I love
Something,
that.
something that I want to share about the first year using Reporteros is that we needed more time to develop the preliminary unit. I remember my students were not at that level yet because, preliminary unit goes fast, different topics. It moves quickly. It's not like a core unit, right? It's more like a review.
Yeah.
So we decided the first year to take the first marking period to complete all the topics that were in the preliminary unit.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that is something, if you are new with the program, that is something you can consider. Depending on the level of proficiency of your students, you can take longer to develop that level because then the following units go faster.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and great experience for me using Reporteros is I enjoy the most the end of unit and end of year projects.
Okay.
When I see my students using all the vocabulary, sentence structures, everything they have learned through the unit, through the school year, and they can see their own progress. I like the projects because it connects them with their own interests or life, and they get motivated to share, and also their classmates are motivated to learn from others. It creates community.
Yeah, that's great. We'll have to have a follow-up session where we talk about the projects and doing them with our students. And I want to point out something that we've learned today from Kelly and from Carmen about using that preliminary unit or that unit 0 or the review unit, which is in levels 1, 2, and 3, is that you can use it in different ways. And so Carmen kind of mentioned one path, which is you can do the entire preliminary unit before you start unit 1. Kelly mentioned another path, which is that you can kind of chunk it out and do parts of the preliminary unit before unit 1, and then another part before unit 2, and another part before unit 3, and so on. And then, of course, another path would be to not use it, right? It is not obligatory at all. So multiple paths, right? Kind of illustrating that flexibility with that preliminary unit. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then we'll see anybody else want to add anything about kind of lessons learned that first year?
I would say, oh, sorry. I would say take advantage of the fabulous professional learning that Clet World Languages provides because
Oh,
so many times there are, whether it's webinars or if you're fortunate enough to have a district or a county or whatever that invests in that as well, that really helped us as a whole world language team really elevate the teaching and learning done in our classrooms. Honestly, it's amazing the difference between when we started and now, and how the teachers through this partnership really are on board with the changes because there were a lot. And instead of all the pushback, we got engagement, and they are seeing what their students can do when we set that high bar. And these materials and resources are absolutely phenomenal and help our students' success. So take advantage of the professional learning. They have a wealth of background knowledge and information, so use that.
thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that. It was
Can I
fun working
piggyback on
with your
that
teachers.
with
Yeah,
Kelly?
of course.
Right now, there's some fabulous CLED Back to School conference that I know, Carmen, you're featured there as well. My coworker, Natalie Munier, who teaches Reporter Francophones, is there too. And actually, our session is about projects. So that might be something that you may be interested in joining that because there are so many great sessions that you can see and it can adapt to your course.
Yeah, thanks, Mia, for bringing that up. I'm going to get the link and I'll post it in the chat for everybody here in a second. And as we're doing that, we can kind of move in a little bit to learning and hearing success stories. So I always love, ending on some positive notes, right? And so we've heard a little bit, but if anybody has any concrete success stories for their students, their teachers, their program that you'd like to share with everybody, we'd love to hear them.
Well, one of the fun things is that unit ideas or essential questions or I guess the themes that you get presented in the lower levels of Reporteros pop up later on as well. And the students just keep going more and more in depth. So if you are somebody that can collaborate with a different level teacher, or you teach multiple levels and you see those alignments, it's actually really fun because the kids can do like a project and present it to a different audience, or they can get feedback on something, and you can have a level 4 student still be doing what they're supposed to be doing, but presenting something to a level 2 student, or level 2 students doing recordings, and that could go to level 1 or level 3. And just like I think it's normal a lot of times for our output, but not the output, the input, what we're giving the students, we usually try to give them a level above, right? And they're trying to start to reach it with their output. So it's still very appropriate, and you can tell your students, if it's for a lower level, try to use some cognates or some expressions, use some visuals. But I find that to be a really unifying thing about Reporteros, that you can do that within your own schools. I do think a lot of the projects can also be fun to be shared across your county or across states or countries. I know the highlight of my Spanish 2 class was doing a video that introduced people to their downtown area or their neighborhood. And we did so much with those. We shared them with other students in the school. We actually shared them with CLET as well, and they shared them with an audience that was international. So it was really neat to be able to do that. The students feel like they have a purpose with their projects. They're very real world aligned, and it'll give them skills that they can use in their life later on, but also in the present, they can have those opportunities to share.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
I'll say that we also do some projects. When we have something about employment, I have the career coaches come in and we do kind of like a short-term type. There's a unit, I believe this in Spanish 4 or 3, maybe 4, about using drones for medical purposes. And so the students have to create an idea of using a drone for something that is not there. And it's a school-wide vote. It's all displayed in the bulletin board. A Google form goes out and everybody gets to participate. The science teachers love to come. I think one of the biggest success stories for me personally is I do believe that Reporteros does prepare the students for the later on. And if your student is one that is going to take an AP language exam, AP language class, it's going to prepare them. I've had very successful scores in the last 2 years. I've been an AP reader from now probably 20 years. And I can see that with this program, the students are definitely moving towards that. I know the AP exam is going to change, but honestly, it's not that much different, just the project part. And Reporteros is giving us that project information, that presentational speaking for the students, really opportunities in every unit to do.
Absolutely. I love that. That's what I want to see for all of our students, right? That they complete their courses and can remember what they learned and use what they learned, right? And we stop hearing that phrase like, oh, I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, and all I can say is, like, ¿dónde está el baño, right? Like, where's the bathroom? And we move away from that and, the users and active participants in the language community. So I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I wanted to share that before I mention how my students feel, especially during the projects. But from the teacher's point of view, I can say that I think they feel excited to find so many resources. There are a variety of different documents, articles, readings, videos, music connected to culture. So I think it helps them save time, authentic resources that we can bring easily to our classes. So when I talk to my colleagues, they feel like, we can use this and that. So it's easier to find what to bring into our classes compared to before having reporteros at school.
I want to say that it's so authentic that I was in Panama last year and I went to La Tapa del Coco, which talks about a chef from Panama. And I went to the restaurant and I met him and I had my CLED book and he signed it. So the
Oh, that's
students
so
love
fun.
that. The students love seeing that there is, Mrs. Bradner with the chef that is in her book that we're reading about. And it was just so great.
Oh, that's so cool. What a unique opportunity. I love that. Great.
I know that
Okay.
the students in our district have talked to their teachers too about how when they do an internet search on these things, these people, these locations, they're like shocked every time. They're like, this is real. This is a real place. This is a real person. Even though they're told that all the time by their teachers, it reinforces that and the authentic piece. And the other piece is that connection then to the AP classes, because students, prior to our adoption of this resource, when we were just reviewing it and we had asked students for their perspectives, they really liked the resource because they felt that the first time they were given authentic resources was in AP, and they weren't comfortable enough at being able to interpret them and navigate things that weren't from the textbook or written by a textbook company. So this way they're doing that from level one, day one. And that's been very beneficial.
And they have things of substance to talk about with people. It's not just that they have the vocabulary or some grammatical concepts. Everything is immersed into target culture. So that was the big thing that made Reporteros stand out when we were looking at which book to adopt. We had certain classes experience different textbooks and they had to give us a write-up about what they thought. They got to weigh in. And that is why Reporteros ended up on top. It was the cultural aspects, them feeling like they were being presented real information, but that they were actually really retaining things that were important or cool or relevant or just intriguing, something that they might be able to experience later on or that they would even want to talk about or explore instead of just, one little box in the corner that says cultural note here and there.
Yeah. A random question here, but do you know if the students have a favorite reporter that they tend to really like this reporter and kind of become a little obsessed but in a fun way?
I never had them rank them, but you were giving me
Well, yeah.
ideas for this.
No, there's one guy in level 2, I know.
Yeah, and the Reporteros one, yes. I remember, Kelly, when I was visiting some of your classrooms, this is a fun story. Was blessed enough to witness, Reporteros live in some of the high schoolers and the middle schoolers in Green Bay. And, we were visiting the classroom and the students came over and I speak Spanish. So they, came over to me in Spanish, right? Said, do you know this reporter? And I was like, I personally don't know him. And they're like, but he's real, right? And I was like, yes, he is a real person. And they're like, does he have social media? I was like, I'm sure he does. Like, I don't have his, Instagram or TikTok, information. But they, you know what I mean? So that was just, for me, it was a wonderful thing to see because they asked me all of those questions in Spanish and it wasn't perfect, of course, but they wanted that information enough that they were like, I'm going to do this. I'm not afraid. And so that I really enjoyed that moment. And so, yes, so they like sometimes they would get really into the reporter and kind of feel like they get to know them, which is a really fun thing. Alrighty, so we're kind of getting close. We're going to save some time for some Q&A directly from our participants, our attendees. And so I know I've got some in that Q&A box, but feel free everybody to add your questions there. So we're going to kind of move to our last little question here on our list of questions, which is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a teacher or administrator, somebody who's going to be starting out with Reporteros or Reporter Francophone for the first time?
I can say that I would say that don't treat the Reporteros series out or Reporteros Francophones as just another textbook to give your teachers time to really learn how to use this proficiency-based program and be comfortable and to provide to them professional development that is meaningful for this series.
I would advise don't feel that you have to use everything right away. Focus on the core units and be flexible. Choose what fit your students best, align with your goals. And remember that it's more important to help students develop communication rather than finishing all the activities and using all the resources.
I think something I would say, I know I told Mir to like act like you've got a cafeteria tray and you're just picking and choosing what you're putting on there. If you have the time though to look a little bit through the unit beforehand, I would kind of make it like you were taking a 2-week trip to a different country. If you have up a travel guidebook, you can't possibly go to every single place, right? So you kind of build an itinerary. So I would make sure you would look in the book. And my big mistake was not looking in the workbook the first year because I was teaching so many levels. I had all new curriculums, all the new Reporteros books, and I missed out. So if you can carve a little extra time, especially if you're like a supervisor, maybe it can be a paid opportunity for some teacher leaders to look at units 1 and 2, another team to look at 3 and 4, something like that, and really like kind of dog ear the pages or find, what's really key in each one. That would be my big takeaway is like, again, you can't do everything, but also find what you like in the textbook and look at the workbook because there's beautiful supports built in. And my first year, I didn't use those beautiful supports. I was making some of my own or trying to pull from what I had because I was kind of like drowning with all of the new because I was teaching every level. So that's my piece of advice. Don't let that workbook or the differentiation, those are my favorite. The differentiation sheets and activities that you can find on the hub, those are treasures.
And if you have the opportunity to collaborate, like across a school or a district or a county or whatever, that helps so much because then you can make lighter work of it, especially if you're teaching all the different levels, but then you can collaborate with somebody else who's also teaching all the different levels to kind of plan out what worked well for you or what things would you recommend we do kind of things so that each year it gets better and you know it more and you have an idea of what you want to do that works. But share that with, especially the new teachers who are coming on board or who have never done this before. And then for those of you that are new to all of this, reach out, again, reach out to CLET. They will give you information to contact different districts and so on if you're looking for more information about how do you do this or how do you kind of figure this out. And again, there's no one way to do it, but there are a lot of different ideas. So kind of use the resources that you can.
Absolutely. All right. So we've got some questions from our audience here. There's lots of good questions. So thank you, everybody. Been responding to some as many as I can. And so now we're going to see if we can get through some of these together. This one I think is a really fun question because it's just illustrates how the educational world and sphere has changed over the years and is continuing to change and adapt. But the question is basically about pacing the Reporteros and the Puerto Francophone curriculum with and without assigning homework. And so in terms of, if your school has a no homework policy, right? Did that affect your pacing, particular in getting through everything in class because the students are not, asked to do anything outside of class and using it for kind of individual projects and practice in the class as well. So do you all have any comments, advice, tips? Yeah.
We do not have, we do have it's not written, but usually students don't have homework. A lot of students work afterwards or take care of their siblings. I would say it did not hurt the pace. I also would say that all the projects were done in class, for me. I think that's really important that all the writing is done there. But I would say it did not affect the pace, at all. Um, and also we only have the hard copy books. We don't have the online licenses. We do have the workbooks. The workbooks are wonderful, and the students do get to write on their workbooks. So I think that is also such a great benefit. They're beautiful and colorful. They have some of them I can use for quick formative assessments, especially the reading comprehensions and things like that, the listening. So there is a lot to pick from.
I do not assign homework. That's very rare. If they have homework, it could be a case by case where they ask for help on something, and I'll pull something from the workbook, or I will make something of my own to help reinforce what they're struggling with. But same thing that Mirta said. I mean, I really want to be there for my students. I do want them to do their work with integrity and for it to be honest as well. That way, they truly are growing. I don't know if it's like that in your schools, but I mean, I've walked by before and I've seen kids that are going to the bathroom to somebody else's class and taking a picture of their work, or somebody's on the ground filling something out from looking on their phone. So for me, I really think the concept of homework has really changed over time. Like Mirta said, there are kids taking care of their siblings, there are people working, or they're in extracurriculars, they're doing sports and things. I want them to be able to do that. Again, going through the Reporteros curriculum, I did not have a problem with that. Students have asked me if there's something that they needed a little bit of extended time on. That's also okay. But yeah, we don't have daily homework in my courses, and the kids are doing great.
Yeah, it's the same for Green Bay. We do not have homework, because it's formative assessment, so it doesn't receive a grade, etc. The students complete the practice things in the classroom, so teachers are making sure they're not giving them, full pages of something that would take a ton of time to do. But if a student wants extra practice, yes, the teacher will give them ideas of things to look at in the textbook, or we have the online platform, so you could listen to these things or do these activities, but it's not an assigned thing to do. And also because of the cheating piece.
Yes, at our school, we do not assign homework, and we have the platform. We use the platform, so students can access to the platform from home, from wherever they are, as long as they have a computer, a device. They can explore by their own. But no, we don't assign homework, and it hasn't affected the pace.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all. Yes, that seems to be the more common, response these days is there is homework, right? That it's no done outside of class, it's all done inside the class. I think we've seen that shift happening. It's very, very interesting. We've got some questions from some middle school teachers in particular about, covering, let's say, the content of Spanish 1, so Reporteros 1 over 3 years, over 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And if they only see them, 2 to 3 times a week for all 3 of those years, kind of, do you all have any recommended kind of content pacing recommendations about maybe moving things out of order? I know, Carmen, you mentioned that a little bit as well. So maybe you can just reinforce what you guys do, but any kind of recommendations if they're using the level 1 over 3 years in middle school.
Well, in our school, a middle school, 6th graders start with Reporteros 1A, 7th graders with Reporteros 1B, and then 8th graders with Reporteros 2. And we focus on present tense, so we follow the units until it gets to the pretérito, and then that's when we jump. But then that's in Reporteros 2. And that is when we, after they are really strong, and usually during the months of February and March, they take the high school placement test. That
Okay.
is exactly when we move to past tense, pretérito, and we move on. We, let's say, catch up with the rest of the units. In our school, students meet 4 times per week for 55 minutes. That is why we decided to use these books in this way.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Carmen. And so to kind of expand, if you think about that, since there's six, main units in level one, if you're dividing that over 3 years as a starting point, you could aim to cover, 2 units per year, right? Which first starting off, even that way and then adapting from there and using that preliminary unit, maybe either in that piecemeal approach or pulling it in, right? Some of it into sixth grade, some of it into seventh, some of it into eighth grade, as review and reinforcements, type of a thing, but absolutely. And then for those of you who are active users of Reporteros, the Reporteros 1, Unit 6, I think it's either lesson 1 or lesson 2, but in that very last unit, it does start to subtly introduce the past tense, the preterite in context. Students don't need to do much with it in terms of producing it there on their own, but they're starting to be exposed to it a bit because it's prepping them to gear them up into level 2 where they're going to have to start doing more active things with it. And so that could be something where maybe that doesn't fit real well at the end of your year. You don't want to start with this. You could save that and use it, in the next year in level 2 to reinforce or so on. There's always that flexibility there. All right. We have a question about the mini projects. So for those of you who've done mini projects or final projects, if you're doing them all in class, right? So you're not asking students to do anything outside of class, how many class periods is it take, more or less? And I know that's obviously going to be different based on each mini project and what it's asking the students to do. But have you noticed any kind of patterns about the time it takes to do that and the different steps in class with the students?
I think it really depends on the mini project that you're doing, if you're adapting anything. I try to just maybe start it at the end of one, maybe 45 minutes and then give them a minute, maybe another 30 the next day, but I like to wrap it up and, no more than 2 half classes and, instead of even starting it all and finishing in the same day, just in case if somebody was out for a meeting or there was some, SGA meeting or somebody went somewhere. So that would be like that. But I would say it just depends on the period, but maybe 2 half periods for me.
And to piggyback off of that, we learned quickly, like, to set very clear time boundaries because they will always need more time. So, it could quickly become 5 class periods for the mini proyecto. So make it very clear, like today you're doing XYZ and tomorrow you're doing this and it's done then, so not where it's, well, maybe we could do part of that the next day then too. And because suddenly they manage to push it out much longer. They're very good.
I tend to keep them and give them back to them in the next class instead of anybody taking their projects out of the classroom as well.
I would say I always carve out at least 2 days for us to be working together. But I do start off the periods where I'm interacting with them or giving them reminders, right? And then we have a checkpoint and then we close it up. So if they have the 2 full class periods, plus I like to let them know about the project the day ahead of time. And so do I give much homework? No, but that will be their homework is to brainstorm and have an idea. So they'll know this is what we're going to be doing for our project. I want you to come in with some ideas. And so that way we're not there on that first day in our group taking 15 minutes to come up with an idea. They can have that part done. They brainstormed, they come in the next day where it's our official day 1 of project. They can do that as part of their warm up, having their idea on a Post-it note or turning and talking, but that will really help move things along. And then as it was mentioned, yes, give them time periods. You can even project the time on the board. I use that classroom screen a lot, and then they can see it nice and big. You can have another little square there that tells them what steps they should be doing. But as long as you're walking around giving them achievable goals in manageable time periods, they'll get it done. But yes, if you let them just go and go and go, there are going to be certain groups that are going to just want to do more and more and polish because the projects are fun. But if you give them a time frame. Your maybe lower achievers, underachievers, people that like to do things very quickly might say, well, geez, we had like 15 minutes to do this part. If they're done in 5, maybe they have to look at it a little deeper, or the other kids are pushed along a little bit like, okay, let's keep on moving.
Reporteros also offers in your resources a checklist for students when they're working on a project. They know they have completed that part of the project where they are. And I think that's always really helpful to keep sort of where you have to be and where the expectations are and what the rubric looks like.
Absolutely. So I think we have time for 2 more questions. Our first question, that the last 2, is going to be about kind of exploratory language courses, or like they mentioned an elective wheel plan where students basically are in the course for 3 months at a time only, right? And so if anybody, and so if you were teaching this, every 3 months you have a different group of students. If you can speak to, using the books in any type of exploratory programs in your schools and districts.
I wish I could, but we do that in the middle school. I taught in the middle school for 2 years and I didn't have Reporteros yet. So somebody else will have to take the lead on this. But I do definitely think that it's possible if you found maybe those. I mean, Unit 0 alone, or the intro, has very interesting I don't know, like mini lessons that you could even take and expand a little bit. So it could give you some ideas of how to get the kids like some little essential survival type of Spanish that then could be applied to something a little bit deeper. So, if you did something with time, maybe then you're going and you're picking a little bit from the schedules in a later unit, or the colors. You can be then looking a little bit at the house for design. But I'm going to put myself on mute so somebody else that has more experience can help you out.
So I know Carmen and Mirta, you both mentioned kind of more middle school some experience. So I'm not sure if either of you have anything to speak to in terms of this type of course.
I'm really looking at our, again, he's taught in the middle school, and I'm super familiar with how the exploratory is these days. I do know they use the Spanish one for, the Spanish one for the whole year, Reporteros one. But I'm checking on this because I don't know the answer to that, and I want to give the wrong information.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, in my school, students start with Spanish in pre-K, so we don't have the exploratory. They come with with knowledge, previous knowledge, and if they are new, they just adjust with a group. We start 6th grade with Spanish 1, developing the preliminary unit.
Of course. And I would say our official, like my recommendation for you as implementation manager at CLET, working with these preliminary type courses, exploratory courses, would be kind of leaning into what Aubrey had suggested, which is to really leverage that preliminary unit as something that's exploratory, especially if you then want to use the Reporteros 1 in Spanish 1 once they're past the exploratory stage, because the content there is different, right? The activities are different. But it touches on the content and the topics and the vocabulary and some of the preliminary grammar that they're going to see coming up in Reporteros. So you can really have a lot of fun with that, and can mix and match and can, expand out as much time or as little time as you want with that preliminary unit. And then, of course, the corresponding activities in the workbook, and then, fun and games and songs and all the fun things to bring into the course as well. And so that would be what we would recommend, is that if you have them, only for like 3 months, and every time it's a new group of students, to really leverage that preliminary.
So we're not using
the preliminary unit during the first year using Reporteros. The students were not at that level yet. So I remember that I needed to incorporate some activities, that I created some activity to reinforce what is in the preliminary unit, because the pace is fast, no? It goes fast. Of course, in the platform, there are activities, some resources, but I think the teacher is going to need to be a little more creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then Mita, you said you're not using the Reporteros for exploratory.
We're using it for level 1 in the 8th grade. For 6 and 7, they're using a different program, so they're not using that for exploratory. I know they have great change, and they have to do French as well.
Absolutely. All right, so we're gonna move on to our very last question that takes us a little bit away from pacing specifically, but I think this is a great thing to end on because it's a part of the proficiency-oriented approach, and can be part of the pacing as well. And so if you all have any strategies you'd like to share that you've learned from using Reporteros to get students to speak the language in the class, not be afraid of speaking, any tips or tricks for our Reporteros users that you've seen have worked?
I think definitely the projects presentations. It's a no judging zone. We're all there learning. I'm a second language learner myself. So I think that helps a lot getting that. And I think the students, like, I like to build, that's something about building a community that has nothing to do with whatever course of work you're teaching or curriculum. You have to build that community. There's a safe space. I know I always remember this as an AP reader, something that we tell people on our table all the time. It's not looking for perfection. We're looking for participation. And that's what really matters most.
I would say lots of grouping activities too, where students can share answers and so on with a partner or a small group or a table, and they become more comfortable doing it in a smaller scale so that when they have to make that a little bigger, it's not such a big deal. And if it's incorporated like every day, we have some fabulous teachers who do warm-ups where it's just a brief, like 3 to 5 minute thing, but the students are already speaking in the language with one another before class even like technically starts. It just becomes an expectation of what they're doing and having that expectation across the board. So again, doesn't matter what language you're in or school, you're going to be speaking.
I think it's important to lower the affective filter so students feel comfortable sharing and participating. So we need to, give positive reinforcement every time they participate, even if it's in English. We should value that so they feel comfortable and more confident little by little sharing. I think it's important to bring interpersonal communication with classmates, with the teacher, and also games, because when they are immersed in a game, they easily produce output language.
Absolutely. And then Aubrey, you had one last thing to add. Let's do it.
Yes, I mean, I would definitely say games. Yes, those are a huge hit. You can even like make it kind of like Among Us or Intruder, where you've got two different questions. Most of the people are answering the one question that you have on top, but there's like three people that you marked on their little post-it note, an X or a star, whatever, and they're answering the other question and trying not to be figured out. So something like that, it really gets the kids that you wouldn't even think would want to participate. Sometimes they start out quieter. They're like ready to either trick somebody or they want to figure this out, like who is the person. So that is, games are always like a trick to open the kids up and get some more participation. I also think projecting things from Reporteros, a lot of times they have a sentence stem already there for the students, or you can make your own visual. It can just be in your own handwriting on the whiteboard, or if you have time to make something pretty on a slide. But to have a question and use that QSSA strategy where the students see the question, they've got a signal to let you know that they've considered the question, they have an idea. They're going to turn, or maybe they'll get up, but they're going to go and talk to other people using the sentence stem. And then you're going to get that overall assessment by calling on some students. And they don't have to give you or the class their own response. They can also choose to share their partner's response. So I think that is an easy way to start. It gets everybody involved. And, if I've got a great response, I can give my own, or if I'm feeling a little bit, shy, I can take my partner's response and say that's what we spoke about. But yes, the more routine that it is, the more willing the students are going to be to do that. And just remind them that their end goal is to be comprehensible. Did they get their message across? Not that it's perfect. And create realistic expectations for each level. You can do that by showing them what would be appropriate at that stage in Spanish or French, whatever language you're teaching, and also English, like what it might sound like or look like at that level so that they can feel confident and know that they're growing and that they're on pace.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. So we are about 5 minutes away from our end time, so I'm going to move to the wrap up portion. But I just want to very first and foremost give a massive round of applause to our panelists. So thank you so much, Kelly, Carmen, Aubrey, and Mirta for being with us this afternoon, this evening, and for sharing all of your insights and your ideas and your tips and your experience. This has really been just very fruitful, and I've just could keep going all night, but we won't because we're all busy people. We also need to sleep, so that's important as well this time of year. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. And to our participants, thank you for your questions. You've got in the chat the links to request a certificate of I think I said assistance, I meant attendance. Your webinar feedback survey, and then also links to request a free sample. If you're not yet a Reporteros user and you want to check it out, please let us know. And then there were also some questions from current users more related to the platform. Obviously, that was not the focus of our time and session today. So any of those users, please feel free to contact me or to fill out our customer support form that's on our website. We will make sure to get you that support. It comes in just different forms than this webinar. So again, thank you everybody so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, your evening, and your week. And good luck to everybody as you're going back to school or in the classrooms with those students. You know, it's summer's ending and it's sad, but a lot of exciting things are on the horizon. So thank you everybody so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you again in a future webinar.